Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back, everyone. We are literally on the home stretch now. We are nearing the end, and I'm still very sad about it, but also really excited to go back out into the world and with this renewed sense of self and of the awareness that I have of other people's experiences and navigate the world with a little more love, a little more patience, a little more kindness. Hopefully that is the outcome of the summit for all of us. I can't think of a better outcome. How are you feeling, Teju?
I'm in awe. I just, when you and I got roped into this, Jordy, we're the latecomers to the team who had been building this for a long time. And I don't think we were able to fully comprehend the sophistication and the genius of the design of this experience. It's not perfect. We're all human, we're all learning, but I'm truly awestruck by how beautifully this has been designed and how people are showing up and engaging with each other in extraordinary ways. It's everything I could hope for, that we could just be real with each other. We can ask simple questions. We can learn together. So I will more in the end of this, but as my dad says, you found a friend when your conversation isn't over. And I feel like I've found a lot of friends in this experience. So yeah, let's bring up Stelli to move more into this question of how we're going to move toward this gender healed world. Stelli, tell us about this next panel, and we have surprise return stars Cynthia and Will with us.
Sure do.
And so that was part of the design. Tell us about that decision to include us all together.
Yeah, sure. So I'm happy to be here in this session with Will and Cynthia again from Jerry, the Gender Equity and Reconciliation International team. And then several of our team members, including we're going to be bringing Jenny back up, Jordan and Teju, of course, and Yosi. And there's so much for us to get into in this next hour. But before we start talking, I want to start by asking Yosi, our fearless leader here, to lead us all in a short meditation. And the idea here is to help us each reflect on our personal vision for a gender-healed world. Always starting with the personal first, and then, of course, moving that energy out into the world. But Yosi, I'd love to turn it over to you to bring us home here.
Thank you. Bring us home. Yeah, home is in our hearts. So let's see what emerges. So I'm gonna try and help myself and all of us get inspired. I mean, we've been inspired through these last few days being together. So I'm gonna do a guided meditation. You've heard a lot about different people's vision of what gender healed world means for them. I'll guide you through a guided meditation, and then let your spirit, your unconscious, manifest what it means to you in your community, in your neighborhood, in your family, in your work environment, small circle, or you could take it to the bigger macro world, and see what comes, and then what that would look like perhaps in 5 years. And then I'm going to have you interview that future self of yours. What's it like for them and how they got there. So that's a little bit of map of the journey we're going to take over the next 4 minutes or so. 3, 4, I don't know. We'll see. So we're going to try and get inspired first. And inspired, first letter is I, so that's inward gazing. So turning our attention and awareness inward. Next is N, nostril breathing. Next is S, spine supporting, spirit soaring. P for posture aligning. I again for inhaling, exhaling. are relaxing, resting, feet flat on the ground, connected to the center core of Mother Earth. E, expanding awareness, pelvis, belly, diaphragm, heart, chest, shoulders, entire body, and the space all around. And D, deepening into essence. And from this place, resting in your essence, let an image of this gender-healed world in your life emerge, whatever that looks like in your family, in your community, in your neighborhood, in your work environment. And just in as much detail, paint that image, that vision, that movie. Let that movie play on the back of your heart. Imagine a screen on the back of your heart and let the movie play there. How do you walk in this world? What's your posture? How do you hold yourself? What's the felt sense of being you, the unique divine being that you are, that is free to be you while others are free to be them? Notice what's it like to greet each other and interact with those people in that world. And as you see this future self of yours, perhaps 5 years from now, walking in this world the way they're walking, I want you to have a conversation with them and ask them how they got there. What is it they did that supported bringing this vision to reality? And just listen to this wisdom of this future self that's already alive and here within you, within all of us. And you might have some clarifying questions about the challenges or what have you. And just ask those questions. And take just a few more breaths to be in their presence, to feel what it's like to be walking in that world. And what's it like to be in the presence of someone who feels their gender liberation, who walks in the world as a liberated being, and know that that person is already alive within you now. And at any time, you can call on their wisdom. Staying rooted in this place, in this vision, this experience, feeling the feet and legs and connection and the support of Mother Earth, the spine aligned, spirit soaring. You can gently open your eyes and let the sounds and the images come to you without going out. So thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Yosi. That was very powerful. Ooh, I feel like I'm in an altered state. Thank you. All right, so I wanted to start by calling Jordan up to the screen. You shared a story with us, Jordan, with our team about a very moving experience that you had with your family of origin, that led you to come up with these 4 amazing lessons for gender healing within family systems. And I was hoping that you'd be willing to share that with the audience today. I just found it so very moving and helpful. So if you're willing, I'd like to invite you to share.
Wow, thanks, Stelli. Sure, I'd be happy to. I also feel like I'm in an altered state. That was so rejuvenating and grounding. So thank you, Yosi, for that too. So for some context, I grew up in a devoutly religious evangelical Christian and deeply conservative family, and one where queerness and transness were not fully understood. And I knew from a very young age that I am in fact queer. And I came out about 20 years ago, and that catalyzed a disconnect between me and my family, especially between me and my parents. And I'll pause here for a moment and say that historically, the story that I've told of my family is one of I'm right and they're wrong. And I think what I've learned is that there's no such thing as right or wrong. And there was I think what we were doing is we were all choosing a path towards suffering, and the dynamic of our relationship was really suffering. And I'll explain that a bit more. But we didn't know how to react to each other. We didn't have language to talk about our feelings, our needs. And so every time we interacted, it was really tense, and there were yelling matches, and there were Bible verses being weaponized, and there were, things said and taken out of context. And I mean, you get it. We've probably all been in those kinds of situations with people who we love deeply. So I was estranged from my family and didn't talk to them for many years. And last year, and around September, my mom sent me a text and said, "Hey, Jordan, I just want you to know that I have cancer. And it's in my lymph nodes and in my lungs and in my breasts. And the doctors think that it's in my blood." So the prognosis for my mom is one that probably ends in death. And I said, well, gosh, I do not want to continue living in this way where we're estranged, but I don't know how to reconcile the pain and the trauma and the anger and the mistrust. So over the past few years, I've been doing a lot of work on myself, and I know we kind of throw that phrase around a lot, and I had many years in the past, but I genuinely was working hard to understand who I am and how I relate to other people. And I was reading a lot of books, and I was listening to community. I mean, Teju, who you all know really well, has been instrumental in my healing and in my journey. And I started dating this guy who I loved more than I think I've ever loved anyone. And we broke up, and it was the hardest heartbreak of my life. And I was at the lowest place I think I've ever been, maybe even lower than when I wanted to kill myself in high school because I was so alone and felt so broken after coming out. But in the lowest point, it was kind of like chiaroscuro, where I saw the darkest part of my life, but I also saw the lightest part of my life. There was a brightness, and I started investigating that, and it was really that metaphorical light at the end of my tunnel. And I started going to group therapy, and one of the things that I learned was that everything is beyond my control, except for my reaction to this moment. And that was a lifeline for me. I was like, oh, I don't have to control all of these things that are happening. Awesome. But it still left me a little uncertain because I didn't know how to react. How am I supposed to react to someone who hates me, who I perceive hates me? How am I supposed to react to transphobia and homophobia and queerphobia and racism? And so I thought, well, I need to be in connection with how I'm really feeling and what I need. And Teju actually recommended a book, who I'm sure many of you have read, called Nonviolent Communication. And Marshall Rosenberg says that we have to ask ourselves, how are you feeling and what do you need? So every morning when I wake up now, I ask myself those two questions. How do I feel and what do I need? And I don't just mean like, oh, I'm relaxed. I have, it was a great night's sleep, even though that's important to know. But I try to look into my mind and into my heart and ask myself, like, scoop out the marrow of my existence and say, how does this feel? And really get into the thick of it. And then based on my feelings, what do I need? But again, I'm left uncertain. I don't really know how to talk about what I need. What I think is right may be very different than what, for instance, my mom thinks is right. So that's when I was led to believe that there is no such thing as right or wrong. It's all subjective. So it's Thich Nhat Hanh who says that we should ask ourselves, does this bring me joy or does this bring me suffering? And again, this is, my friendship with Teju. I keep talking about you, Teju. I just love you so much. So Teju and I talk a lot about Thich Nhat Hanh. And instead of asking ourselves what's right or wrong, we ask ourselves what brings us joy and what brings us suffering. And at that moment, I was like, you know what? I've been doing all of this work. I've been learning about how I react, how I feel, what I need. And it's going to bring me a lot of joy to make amends with my family. I think if I were to stay in this state where I am just, I'm this gender, I'm this sexuality, my family doesn't get it, so they're wrong and I'm right, it's going to bring me suffering down the road. And I didn't know if that was the right answer. So the last thing, those are the four things. Everything's beyond my control except for my reaction to this moment. How do I react? I ask myself, what do I feel and what do I need? How do I know what I need? I ask myself, is this going to bring me joy or is this going to bring me suffering? And then how do I know that I'm doing all of this in a way that's healthy for me and healthy for the people around me, in a way that's sustainable? I stay deeply rooted in community. I surround myself with people who are in alignment, and I ask them, I talk to them, I'm in communication with them, and together, because I can't do anything alone, together we figure out a way for us all to move forward in love. So those are the four things that I learned. And I have to tell you, after I went home in October of last year, I spent 3 months in my hometown. And I was really nervous to go back to Alabama for such an extended period of time, especially after not having talked to my family. And the very first Sunday I was home, my mom always cooks a big dinner, and she's riddled with cancer and weaker than she normally is, but she would not rest. And she said, I'm making dinner, you're home. It was delicious. But we sit down and we start eating, and my mom said, well, I want to tell y'all a story. And she said, this morning at church, this lesbian came up and she said to the congregation, I am forsaking my lifestyle and I'm turning to Jesus. And immediately my blood starts, my blood pressure rises, my cheeks are red, my palms are sweaty. And I say, hey, I don't think that we can have this conversation right now. I don't have a lot of practice talking to you all about these things without getting upset, without raising my voice, without storming off. And immediately I was like, oh my gosh, who am I in this moment? Is it my transness? Is it my queerness? Is it my anti-racism? What is like boiling right now? So I had to calm myself, and I said, okay, family, if we're going to have this conversation, I have a framework through which we must communicate. The first is everything must be couched in our feelings and in our needs. And my family scratched their head and they said, okay, we can do that. And then I said, next, I don't want us to talk about anything through our own understanding of ethics or morality. I want us to talk about our joy or our suffering. And my family was on board. And my family said, okay, after something is said, let's take a pause, we'll process, and then we'll communicate. We spent the next 3.5 hours having the most healing conversation that my family has had in at least 2 decades. And at the end of it, we were all crying and hugging. And my mom said, well, Jordan, I just want to get this straight. The difference between gay and non-binary is, and my jaw dropped to the floor and I said, thank you, Dolly Parton, for hearing my prayers. And we continued to fellowship around the table. So I'll caveat all of this by saying, I don't know that this will work for you, but what I do know is that if you investigate how you're feeling and what you need, you might too come up with a framework that is that's healthy for you and that helps you communicate with the people that you love. And for me, this is the framework through which I hope to achieve a gender-filled world for myself and my community. Thank you so much for allowing me to share.
Yeah, that was very beautiful, Jordan. Thank you so much. I'm glad that this is being recorded. I want to hear your story again. And those 4 rules for life, we've put them in the chat for everybody. Jordan's rules for life. So if you check on the chat, you can copy and paste that bit of wisdom. So thanks again. So Cynthia and Will, I'm really curious to hear your perspectives. I mean, you all have been doing this work for over 30 years, and you've been at the summit with us the past 3 days. And I'm just curious, has your vision changed at all? What are some of the insights or reflections that you've had these past 3 days?
Thank you, Stelli. I'll jump in first. Yeah, I don't think my vision has changed. I think my heart has expanded. And as it always does in conversations like this, in communities where we can really hold each other and be safe with one another. And I'll just quote someone that Will mentioned when we were presenting earlier, Professor Pumla Gobodo-Madikizela from South Africa, who is part of the Stellenbosch University. And she says, what we most need now is to make public spaces intimate. That's what we've been doing here at some level. Of course, we have a whole community of people out there, and through the breakout sessions, they even got to share at a deep level. And I've been hearing beautiful sharings about what those have been like. So I think it's been very heart-opening for everyone. What I'm aware of still is the need for safety, and even on this conference, we kept the chat room safe, the space safe by limiting the chats, and we still need to do that. So Jordan, I so appreciate your story, and it's so beautiful to hear the healing that's happened. And I also really appreciate, Jordan, you saying, I don't know what's right for you, because I think your framework is great, and everyone can come up with their own framework and know when the right time is to have those conversations, right? Because it's still not safe out there fully for everyone. And so I just say that because that's part of the work we do in the Jerry work, is to, and you've heard it, to create as safe a space as possible for everyone. And so one technique, I'll just share it real quickly. One technique we use, if you start feeling stirred, or you may have heard this, the butterfly wings or the bilateral movement, which actually in the science of it helps to regulate your brain, your mind, when you're getting triggered. And so if you go into a situation like your family or maybe walking down the street, I often say if you're at a holiday dinner or something and someone in the family or your friends are saying something that's triggering you, just move your hands or feet back and forth. And doing that bilateral movement helps to keep you in the conversation, helps you to stay centered and not get triggered and do the fight or flight mode. And what Pumla is saying about making intimate public spaces intimate is so true. We need to have these conversations. And at the same time, we need to be in the communities that can really hear us. I was really moved by Andrea's talk, as I think many of you are. And I'll just say, when she talked about being in the chemo room, and everything became equalized. And Jordan, you just said it with your mom. And I'll just bring forward that our daughter, Emily, who is 33 years old, was just diagnosed with breast cancer. So she's in chemo. Everything gets equalized. And some of our other friends and leaders, and Jerry, they have family members. So these health issues, these things that are coming up just make such a difference. And it's like, what are we here for? You know, where are we meeting in the heart? And the socio-political is so important, but to fight it out is not my way. My way, it doesn't mean to not speak truth, which I do, but to do it and love it out, to love it out, to keep showing up with a heart of love. And that's what I've experienced this weekend with this conference. There were times when people didn't agree totally, but there was love pouring out of everyone. And that is so beautiful. And even though some of those people that might not be in our community aren't here, maybe they are, but maybe they aren't. Maybe there's that wider expansion. I trust that what we're doing here is the microcosm. It is the beacon of light that we don't even know how much it's rippling out, how much everything is just expanding out into the universe. I trust that, you know? And so I will just complete, because I know there's several of us here that want to speak. And Stelli, are we going to have a chance about the gender healed world vision?
Yeah, absolutely.
Should I say it now?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so there's so many things to talk about, but one thing that's big for me and that I learned from my dear mother, who actually introduced me to this work 28 years ago. She came to a Jerry workshop then, and she came home and said to me, Cynthia, I want to gift you by sending you to one of these workshops, and everything I screwed up in your life, this work will heal you. She had no idea what would happen, but isn't that a pretty cool mom? So my mother was very much about her sexuality, and she actually found her spirituality in her sexuality. And I am blessed to have been taught about whole and healthy sexuality. It doesn't mean I haven't had sexual violence in my life, but my vision is that we can come back into wholeness through our bodies, through our love for one another, both in the intimate conversations that are non-sexual, but also in our relationships, so that we can really meet one another in that sacred union of sexuality and not be guided and led by pornography. Not that pornography doesn't have a place in some places, but a lot of it doesn't, as we know. So that's my vision, that we can come into whole beings in our sexuality and in our love in the heart and our intimacy and friendship with one another. So I'll close there for now so others can have a chance.
Yeah, thank you. Will, how about you?
Well, again, just thank you for the question. This has been such an inspiring conference. And I was thrilled to hear
Jordan and Teju are talking about Thich Nhat Hanh. So I'll start there because that goes back to the origins of the work that we do. In the 80s, as I said, I'm an environmental scientist by training, and Thich Nhat Hanh came over to the United States and did a series of retreats for environmentalists. And I attended a couple of those. And at one point, he said something that went right into my heart. And he was speaking to environmental scientists and lawyers. I mean, that's what we mostly were, activists. He said, when it comes to environmentalists, what we most need to do is to hear within ourselves the sounds of the earth crying. And that insight, I remember I was meditating like a day or two later, and I transformed it into the gender issue, because we had this issue going down within the environmental movement that couldn't be talked about, as I mentioned earlier. And I realized that is what we need to do. What we most need to do is to hear within our own hearts the sounds of the other gender crying. We need to have some kind of forum where that pain can be transmitted and received. Because if we follow skillfully that heartbreak, it breaks our hearts open in such a way that our broken open heart becomes part of the humanity healing itself. So that was a very beautiful insight from Thich Nhat Hanh, and in a certain way, that was one of the keys that got us going in this work. So I feel like there's been so much richness in this summit, which has just empowered and strengthened our vision. And one of the things that I so appreciated that Andrea said was she talked about genderfulness and the kind of the wonderfulness of genderfulness, and that the gender journey is so exciting in all of its facets and dimensions. But then she also spoke of a place of genderlessness. There's a place beyond gender where we can go. And that resonates for me, that the whole point of gender fullness is to explore all its magic and mysteries, and then to follow the thread of it to a place that takes us beyond gender altogether into that, essentially that mystical oneness that all of the great spiritual traditions teach about, which is really our connection with the infinite. And when I imagine a gender-healed world, when we imagine that so often, and we've done this exercise for decades, 30 years in our workshop, and probably 80 to 90% or more of the answers that come from people, which are very understandable, are basically about creating safety. And so they are all the things that'll be missing, all the forms of oppression, all the forms of violence, all the things that'll be absent, which will make it possible for someone to walk free in the world. And that's all absolutely right. But I think we cannot even begin to imagine the profundity of what will happen when we finally achieve this gender-healed world. Because as I understand it, the gender wound truly is one of the deepest wounds in society. And parenthetically here, not to bring politics in, but I just have to bring in this one line from Steve Bannon that you may have heard a couple years ago, whenever it was when he was, so active. And he said, the anti-patriarchy movement is going to undo 10,000 years of recorded history. And of course, he was lamenting this and bringing this sort of as a fearsome warning. And I agree with that, but we're celebrating it because this gender oppression is about 10,000 years old, and it has profoundly oppressed the entire human family so deeply that it's hard for us to even imagine what is possible once we're free of it. And what I perceive is that we will recognize the unique divine gift that every human being is to life, and that we will reclaim a certain sacred magic that is inherent in our humanity. that has been so suppressed. It's not completely lost, but it has been so suppressed. And so it's hard for us to even imagine the profundity of what will emerge, and that we will all embody the different dimensions of gender graciously, as actually the great mystics have always done. They have always transcended gender limitations and incorporated kind of, especially the eternal masculine and feminine principles that Andrea spoke to so beautifully. She said masculine and feminine energies in us all are eternal. And because of that, when we connect to the eternal, we become those dimensions. For example, it was said of Teresa, Saint Teresa of Avila, 1500s. And it was said of her that men encountered in Saint Teresa a woman who was more of a man than they were, while also being fully a woman. Because she had, transcended a limitation with her femininity and manifested the fullness of her humanity. And that's what I think will happen for all of us. And so I see a very profound possibility. And I just want to say that we're clearly in the place of a queer revolution and a non-binary revolution. And of course, we applaud that, and that's great. But this is also a masculinity revolution. Deleuze was talking about this panel on liberatory masculinity, and we also have liberatory femininity. All of these gender roles and oppressive structures are being liberated and reinvented. And I was very struck by something that Deleuze said, where at a conference at Yale or somewhere some time back, where he proposed a workshop on queerness and spirituality, and it became the most highest attended workshop of them all. And that is what I think will happen with this gender conversation. It'll lead us directly into our spirituality. And that'll be the most richest aspect of a gender-healed world, is there will be this kind of seamless flow. And as Rumi says, the great mystical poet, Rumi says that you are not just a drop from the infinite ocean. You are the infinite ocean contained in a single drop. Each one of us is a divine revelation walking on this earth. And when we discover the fullness of that, we discover the fullness of the infinity within that's manifest in each and every human being. And that is the way in which we will live. So I think it's really very profound what we're working on here, and so inspiring to be part of this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Will. What a beautiful vision. Appreciate you sharing that with us. So I'd like to invite Teju to reflect upon your vision of a gender-healed world. I'm sure you have lots of wisdom to share with us.
Thank you, Stelli. Can you give me a time limit?
About 3 minutes or so.
Oh no. Okay. That's perfect. It's exactly as it's supposed to be. So I'm mesmerized by the words of my friends here. Thank you all so much. And it's such a gift to be with you all. And actually, I think that my vision for a gender-healed world is summed up in just one word: friendship. And when I think about myself as a child, I have this memory. I grew up in Colorado, going to Washington Square Park, just Washington Park, Wash Park, as we called it. And I went onto the playground. There was one other kid there, and I just ran up to him, and it was like, "Hey, do you want to play?" And every time I had asked this question to any kid on any playground, the answer was like, "Yeah, okay, great." And we just started playing together, and nobody asked for an introduction. Nobody was like, "Where do you come from? What do you want?" There was nothing like that. It was just, "You're a kid, I'm a kid, let's play." And that was the most extraordinary. That was a very extraordinary time of my life, because that was the way that friendship happened, And friendship has an etymological origin in the word freedom. To be a friend is to practice freedom. Someone who is free is able to be friends with other people. And so there is perhaps nothing more freeing and powerful, in my experience, than friendship. And one of the gifts that we offer to other people in friendship is being ourselves. Andrea Gibson said in their remarks that being myself is always, always a generosity for others. And my wish is that through friendship, through family, through love, every child is taught this. Being you is always a generosity to others. You don't need to be a specific way or a specific thing. You get to be you. And of course, you get to support other people being them. And that harmony that I think we all know how to do, that's a capacity we all have had since being children. I have two beautiful nephews who I get to spend time with every day. And that's the way that they treat each other and they treat every being. My nephew Covey goes into the garden and he sees a flower and he just laughs. He goes into the garden and he sees a flower and he just thinks it's hilarious. It's amazing to see this flower just being a flower, and finds delight in that. And I think in this moment in Washington Park, when I asked this kid, would you like to play with me? He said, you're a stranger. And it was one of the first moments I remember we couldn't just be free to be friends. We're suddenly taught that there's this qualification or this designation. Someone's deserving of our friendship or not deserving, deserving of our love or not deserving. And that kept happening. You know, I tried to play soccer with kids in elementary school, and there was a couple of kids who said, you're too dark to play with us. There were so many ways in which I was told, you can't be friends with us. We can't be friends. And it was the deepest pain that I think I ever experienced. So long, even to this day, I just feel like a child who wants friends, who wants to connect with other people. And I think, though, that what I learned was, you know, for a while to deal with this pain was I have to like be the best. I have to perform. I have to be smart. I have to win, you know, all the time. That'll prove I have to be the best soccer player. Then they'll never exclude me. And it wasn't until I went to high school and got to calculus where I really wrestled. I had a hard time with calculus, and it was so difficult that I had to ask someone for help. And that was a moment for this person to be herself and to share with me her wisdom and knowledge. And we became friends by my asking her for help. And I learned that, in fact, it's not about being impenetrable or winning as much as it is about, you know, being open and real and honest. And sometimes that means asking for help. And so I think Martin Luther King said this, that I'm convinced that people hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. And they don't know each other because they don't communicate with each other. And they don't communicate with each other because they are separated from each other. And I think friendship is that great bridge between us and separation. What has the queer movement done for our world, where people coming out, just being who they authentically are, has meant that almost every single one of us knows someone who is queer. So that when you go to the ballot box and you have to cast a vote, you're thinking about your nephew who might be queer, or you're thinking about your sister who's now become your brother or your sibling. You know, when Joe Biden goes, you know, as vice president, accidentally lets slip that he supports, you know, gay rights, and Obama then does too, and now suddenly it's legal for us. The queer movement showed us that through 50 years of authentic, taking the risk, which of course was in some cases life-threatening, to be authentic, our whole nation has changed and can continue to change. So I think that by practicing friendship, by being friends with each other, by finding that space where we can be ourselves and offer that generosity to others, we can create change. And we should never minimize the power of just being a friend, just practicing that with each other. To me, that's what this space has been, a place to practice friendship. That's where empathy breakouts have been. That's where all these conversations have been. We can be real here with each other. We can say things that are not normally safe to say. So for me, my vision in one word is friendship. And I'd love to say more later, but I think I'm way over my 3 minutes. So thanks, Stelli, for humoring me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Teju. And thanks for that memory of, you know, when we're kids, before we're socialized, where all we want to do is just play and be open to play with each other, where we don't see skin color or gender. You know, it's very beautiful, that period in our lives. I wish we could all go back to that somehow. Thank you. All right, Jenny, would love to hear your thoughts on this topic.
Thank you. I've been really struck by the beauty of what everybody has said throughout the conference, but particularly now as we're talking about our vision for a gender-healed world and how all of these visions just seem like facets of the same beautiful stone, reflecting love and reflecting truth and reflecting justice. So I think when I think about a gender-healed world, my vision for it is not nearly as elaborate as what other people have said. It would just be a place where each of us deeply loved ourselves. Because when you truly love and accept yourself, with all the messiness, with whatever you've got, but when you truly love yourself, you can't project your fears or your complexes or what's happened to you onto other people. And without those projections, we're in that place of the children. You know, we just want to play with each other. We don't have to fix ourselves. We don't have to fix the other person. We don't have to be right. They don't have to be wrong. We can just play, and we can play together. And so many of us have talked about that in different language. The language that always speaks to me about this is Rumi's language, that I think goes right back to what Jordan was saying about his family, what others have said in other language. And that's that little poem, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. And the second part of that is usually not quoted is, when the soul lies down in that grass, in that field, the world is too full to talk about. So it's that place beyond, and we can only get beyond wrongdoing and right doing when we love ourselves. That's the only time we can love everybody else for the way they show up.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jenny. So for myself, thinking about my vision of a gender-healed world, I think it would be some version of what Jordan, you experienced with your family, because I think a lot of our ideas about ourselves and gender, and it starts in our family systems. And I think that there's a lot of wounding in families, a lot that goes on behind closed doors, secrets, I mean, you name it. So I would just love to see it start at that level. I don't know how that would happen, but I just picture, like on Sunday in small villages where, everybody in the past may have gone to church instead, where everybody's inside with their families having this process, almost like an intervention, but having this beautiful experience like Jordan did with his family. For each family to have some version of that would be just a beautiful thing. I don't know how we would ever get there, but that would be my right now. It feels like a fantasy, and I wish it didn't. I wish it were more real, but yeah, I just appreciate the vision you all are holding, because I think I tend to be a little bit more of a pessimist or a realist, just because I so long for others that aren't at this conference. I feel like there are other people in the world that just aren't turned in the same direction that we are. And, kind of hurts my heart that more people aren't interested and engaged at this level. So I hope somehow their hearts will be touched and they will be transformed to do this work as well. So, yeah. But at this time, we have 12 minutes left before we transition to our last segment. So I'd like to invite everybody up on the screen just to see if anybody has any closing comments or thoughts or reflections on what's been shared thus far.
Well, I'll say this, Jenny. I love that Rumi quote, and I'm glad you added a piece, and I'll continue it with another piece. I think, as you said, when the soul lies down in thy grass, the world is too full to talk about. Then he continues, ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. So this is the problem where we're talking And so I'll just be silent.
Maybe I can just add one little piece in there. That place is what Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing, where we discover that each of us contains all of us. And in that space of interbeing, that's where I think this work eventually leads us.
Just add that we have come a long way, even when it feels like we haven't. So when I was born in the 60s, so about 55 years ago, when I was 5 years old and I was dreaming of what I might be in the world, I had three choices: a secretary, a teacher, or a nurse, because I was labeled as a girl. And those were the only jobs available. And I remember studying at like 8 years old about Elizabeth Blackwell, who was one of the first women physicians. And her story just opened my heart. And I was like, wow, something bigger than what I'm put in this box. So, that gives me hope. It's hard to think when we're in the struggle, when we're in this mix of going, things feel like they're going backwards, and at times they are. But I also can look back at where I came from, and we've made such strides. And I must say, in the United States, the ERA amendment was just pushed down again. How many years has it been? It should have passed the first time, and it hasn't still. So that's the Equal Rights Amendment for people outside of the states who might not know. Equal Rights Amendment for women. And so I do have hope. And we had our conference, our summit back in October, our Jerry Summit, celebrating our 30 years. And we put out the hope and the vision that we can do this. We can transform this gender crisis, this gender injustice. We can do it, and we are doing it. And we can do it within the next generation. And this is an example of that. And I just want to say, being in the US, where North America, where challenges do exist, and politics is right there casting down laws that are violating people's rights. But here we are speaking, and there's places in the world that it's not safe for some people to speak. It's not safe to be gay or lesbian. It's not safe to be trans, because by jailing, by imprisonment, even killing people because of their sexual orientation or gender identity, it's not safe to be a woman. And as was pointed out, I can't remember, I'm sorry who said it, but I can't remember, but just, it was on the men's panel about the war in Ukraine and Russia, and all those male identified people and people identified as male by society who are forced into war. So all of those are there. And at the same time, I have immense hope for what we're doing here. And it is making a difference in changing the structures that are binding us.
I don't know if there's time for this, but perhaps we could all take just a moment of silence to hold those who are still actively being traumatized because of their identity, whether they be abroad or close to home. you for that time.
So
Thank
Yosi, I'm curious about you and your feelings. Has anything shifted from before the summit to now with your vision or?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Well, I'm searching for words. I think I appreciate Jordan's invitation into silence, and yeah, I do have hope. I think we've quoted Martin Luther King Jr. several times, but he did say the arc of history bends towards justice. It's a long arc, and I'm misquoting it, but it's something to that effect. So I do have hope for humanity. I do have hope as long as there are people like us doing this. I think there's a goodness in each human heart, regardless of how they look. And I think the more of us carry this spark of goodness, it will light up that flame that exists dormant in everyone's heart. And I don't know how long it's going to take, but things are getting better. And in many ways, there are some ways around the environment or what have you that it isn't. But I think it's a spiritual evolution of consciousness that we're talking about. And I'm in for the long ride. I can't imagine any better ride to be on and any better cause to be involved in. So. And I'm touched. I'm just like blown away that I put out this call and all of you and so many people resonated. So that tells me that there is, we had 6,000 people registered or something like that. And we had amazing souls come together. And you all, I'm just, I get teary just thinking about it. Like, wow, like, it just, it's so touching that, so there's something in our hearts that wants to engender love and within ourselves and the world. I believe that's in everybody. Whoever you think is whatever, whether it's Putin or Trump or whatever. I think human nature by its essence is good, and those people are traumatized. And, narcissism comes from deep shame and inadequacy. And when we feel disempowered within ourselves, that's when the only way to feel our power is power over. But when people are happy and empowered, there's very little need in our hearts to do the power over game. So my practice these days is to hold these people in my heart in compassion and understand the suffering from which they're acting out. And it's a hard practice because at the practical level, what they're doing is causing a lot of harm. And so, okay, I can keep talking.
Yeah, we're almost
be quiet.
Yeah, we're almost at ending time. I was just having this vision of Yosi 30 years from now, like Cynthia and Will having done this work, will be like Jerry, looking back on this day as the day that kind of, or this time that, initiated this new work, this new paradigm, right? Like Pat McKay was talking about that new paradigm instead of power over. I forget what she called it, but that's the vision I think we can all hold going forward.
Yeah, well, I don't think we initiated this day. We're just moving the ball forward an inch or two. So
I'm at your organization. I'm in Engendering Love.
yeah, oh, okay, yeah,
As an organization, like Jerry's been at it for 30 years. So
yeah.
in 30 years, Engendering Love will be at it. Teju and Jordan will have done amazing things, and Jenny.
We'll be up here emceeing the summit 30 years from now. Hello, everyone.
I'll be saying, where are the young people?
And I just need to, because I just need to interject one thing. If you are not familiar with her fantastic work that Jenny Wade did on transcendent sexuality, I strongly recommend her book, which was published about 20 years ago, called Transcendent Sex, that actually documents the power of sexuality to serve this transformation that we're speaking of, and to serve our spiritual growth and evolution. So, Jenny, I'm sorry to out you, but it's such a beautiful piece of work, and I didn't hear you bring it forward. So it's very important, because the whole function and relationship to sexuality will also radically be transformed in all of this in a very positive direction. And in my view, Jenny's written one of the most important books and research studies that's been done on that. So.
All right, I'll second that, but I will also point Jenny's earlier book on human development, and because it is about the development of consciousness. And so
Hey,
that,
Jenny, your sales just have spiked. And everyone needs to write reviews for all of us authors out there. Get your reviews, because that's what it's all about, our likes.
Thank you.
Great
Thanks
takeaway from this conference.
Very much.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. This was lovely having your reflections and your visions. Really appreciate it. If it's all right with you, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Teju and Jordan, who are going to introduce our next session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stelli. Thank you, Yosi.